Let's give ourselves a second to make sure everything's running properly. Okay, so for those of you who haven't watched my previous video, I spoke about a couple of important things that you can head back and watch after this live stream. There were a lot of updates from the ground on Gaza with the Palestinian resistance. We had activities from Al-Qassam brigades. We had activities from Saraya al-Quds, the armed wing of the PIJ, and Kataib Shuhada al-Aqsa, which is Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades that belongs to Fatah. And most of them were around the area of Khan Yunis. Not inside Khan Yunis, but around Khan Yunis. Many people will tell you some of these battles they're not inside of Khan Yunis, they're in the province, but not in the main town, because Israel sells the people the idea that they are inside of Khan Yunis, that they obviously destroyed all of the brigades all across Gaza, and it couldn't be further away from the truth. The second thing that I spoke about is the ICJ ordering Israel to allow aid and medicine in Gaza and how likely that is to happen. And another thing that I spoke about is the Iraqi resistance targeting the Ministry of Defense in Israel. If you did watch that video and if you have any comments or questions regarding it, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But what I wanted to speak about in this live stream particularly is the latest announcement from the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant. So what did he say exactly? Yoav Gallant said Israel has been pushing for an international force to come to Gaza. For those of you who are unaware, the talk about an international force in Gaza has been there from a very long time ago. The recent development is that it's about to happen at some point very soon. I'm going to tell you what the Palestinians responded to regarding this international force after I tell you exactly what he said. They reached an agreement, an initial agreement with 3 supposedly Arab countries that they will have forces temporarily in Gaza that would be in charge of managing the floating pier that the United States is establishing. He reportedly announced to Benjamin Netanyahu that we're very close to close the deal with this, and that this force will be in charge of delivering the aid to the people of Gaza. And I wanted to highlight a couple of comments here. Firstly, the announcement itself came from Israel. So it's Israel that's pushing for this idea. We need to remember that it's the same country that's committing a genocide that's pushing for the idea of international forces. And Yoav Gallant, the defense minister himself, commented on the floating pier previously. He said it's primarily there by the approval of Israel to undermine the authority of Hamas. They want the pier to be there so that the people of Gaza can receive aid, right? Which is another joke from Israel because there's aid on the land, to undermine the rule of Hamas. So the notion that it's there to serve the people of Gaza is completely flawed and detached from reality. They're not there to support the people of Gaza. They're there to undermine the rule of Hamas and potentially something far worse than that, which is toppling all of their power in Gaza to allow Israel to take over Gaza more smoothly. Why? Because Israel on its own is incapable of controlling Gaza on its own. Any cover, any other force that will come into Gaza, take away some of what Israel's doing, whether it's them getting the aid, managing the aid. Obviously, Israel's destroying the aid, right? But they will do it under any cover to undermine Hamas and to complete taking over, in their opinion, obviously, the Gaza Strip. Another comment here. This is being promoted by some countries. Now, the names of the Arab countries haven't been mentioned yet. No one mentioned them. They will most likely be countries that are aligned with Israel but have some sort of relationship with Hamas. However, we still haven't had a reaction from the Palestinians yet regarding this, but they had a comment previously. Because the talks were there from a very long time ago, they stated previously that they will deal with any international force in Gaza as an occupying force. They didn't completely rule out international forces being there to let aid in or whatever, so they're probably open for the option, but to them, it will be an occupying force. This is what people need to understand. The same announcement might come again soon, and they will elaborate further, but they're treating it as such. Another thing that we should highlight very well here, and it's very, very important, if the concern is the people of Gaza, you already have aid on the ground. You have thousands of trucks waiting. You have aid going in from Karm Abu Salim crossing and from the Rafah crossing, and Israel is not allowing it to reach the northern part of Gaza. Why? Because they want to take Gaza step by step. They want to start by completely ethnically cleansing the northern part of Gaza, starving people to death. They're killing people left, right, and center. We're seeing images day by day, how they're mass executing people, what they've done, the massacre, the barbaric massacre, mass rapes that they've committed in Al Shifa Hospital and other hospitals in Gaza. So they're not concerned about the population. They want to kill the population. They want to expel them, but they want to undermine the Hamas rule and they want to completely get rid of the population from the northern part of Gaza. Another very important thing here is that this notion is still talking about managing Gaza, the day after Gaza, managing what's happening in Gaza. What we should be talking about is not what's after the war in Gaza, but what's after in Israel. It's Israel, which is the occupying force, the one who's committing a genocide and killing 33 almost thousand people and wounding over 70,000 people, not allowing aid, not allowing medicine, and committing its barbaric genocide in Gaza. This was the main update that I wanted to talk to you about in this live stream, and I'll open the space up for you. If you have any questions or comments, I would be happy to address these. Apologies in advance if I'm not able to reach all of them, but I will do my best to address all of your questions and comments. Bob Branton, thank you. Daniela Modus Cutter, thank you. And Lisa, thank you so much for your supers that you've been sending. And welcome to everyone greeting and joining me. Thank you for joining in, waiting, and anyone joining us as and when. Welcome to the live stream. Muna asked me about the protests in Jordan previously. Well, they're escalating. Clearly, the population in Jordan has had enough. Many people estimated that Arab countries will see more turmoil when it comes to Gaza. I've been a little bit skeptical when it comes to Egypt. I might be wrong. But in Jordan, it's clearly picking up the pace. Most of the protests were the big protests were around the Israeli embassy, but they're growing. The numbers are growing and they are being more aggressive and they are being more intense. Now, people need to remember all of the protests that happen in Jordan, they need to be authorized by the Jordanian government, and they are usually in a very restricted places. We haven't seen anything that what's out of the norm from what's happening now is the level that's increasing, but we have seen previous instances where the Jordanians were speaking out loud against previous wars, even in Gaza. It's probably the most intense situation during this genocide, particularly. And it's clearly showing that people are still alive, really. People still have their humanity in them, and they're showing their frustration and anger from their governments, whether when it comes to their government's complicity or lack of action, or direct support for Israel, which is what Jordan has been reportedly doing by providing this land route to Israel when Israel's been committing a genocide against the population in Gaza and not allowing basic necessities in and starving people to death, starving children to death, starving women to death. The situation is diabolical in Gaza, yet these countries, you have some Arab countries that are neighboring to Israel, supporting Israel and providing a lifeline for them, which is a shameful situation that any decent human being will reject and speak out against as much as possible. So I do hope they continue their pressure. And let's also call for our governments anywhere we live in, really, to continuously apply more pressure, stop supporting this genocide, and finally take a stance that they should take against this genocide, against this massacre, against this crime against humanity. This crime that's happening in Gaza is not against the people of Gaza only, but it's against any human being on planet Earth. Anyone justifying what's happening in Gaza against the Palestinian people is justifying it against themselves when the time is right. Because if you support a government that's committing or supporting this genocide, then you're legitimizing the act that can come on you and your family at any given moment that these governments, the same governments, will choose that is suitable for them. So that's when it comes to Muna's question regarding the protests in Jordan. And we'll move on to the next one. Again, thank you for everyone joining us. And obviously, you're free to also participate in the conversation and share your conversations and comments and questions as well. Blank stares, Russian Navy sailing to the Red Sea. Look, Russia's been increasing its presence all across, really. You've had these drills, the joint drills that they've had with China and Iran, that were also observed by many other countries. Russia is preparing. Look, we haven't seen significant forces in the Red Sea from Russia, but they're clearly planning for something. We're having the biggest drills almost in NATO's history, at least the biggest in recent decades, that will have in total 90,000 troops from NATO member states participating to the north of Scandinavia. So you're talking about a very tense situation, and the countries that are opposing the US hegemony, because let's not forget what's happening with the NATO and Europe is US led at the end of the day. US controls the foreign policy of Europe, really, bar maybe a couple of countries that are there to kind of not really align themselves completely with the US, but the US controls Europe. They control them in terms of foreign policy. You have the same powers running Europe are also aligned with America. Europe is really the little puppet of the United States of America. We don't see a lot of independence when it comes to Europe as a continent. And obviously, Russia is not going to be naive, neither them nor China, nor any other countries, really. BRICS is expanding now. We're seeing an increasingly growing front against the US hegemony and bully attitude across the world, because the United States sees the world as its own backyard, really. Its own corporate backyard. They can sail next to China, and they will complain if China says no, no, please leave our seas, right? The same entitlement. And I previously stated how the same countries really that are supporting Israel at the moment have the same ideological background, really, when it comes to entitlement and supremacy, and thinking that they can control everything. This neo-colonial mentality, that's a disease that we need to get rid of, really. But they're obviously not naive. They will increase their presence in areas that are relevant for them. We're constantly seeing an expansion of their coordination with China and Iran and other countries. And we need to reach an end to this hegemony and bullying from the United States that's clearly supporting genocide, and in many cases is in a position far worse than Israel by enabling it and providing Israel with what it needs. Let's go to your next question. I'll try not to miss any of them this time. And hello and greetings to everyone joining us. Tekken 8LA, interesting question. What's the real reason USA supports Israel? You see, that's a very interesting question. Sometimes these basic direct questions are the most important questions, and that's debatable. That's a matter of debate. So, officially, if you look at the United States administration officials, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, they will view Israel as a strategic front in the Middle East. Like RFK, who is considered an alternative, right, presidential candidate, Kennedy, he said that he compared Israel to like an aircraft carrier in the Middle East. Biden said previously, if we didn't have an Israel, we would create in Israel. The location of Palestine is very strategic. It connects Africa to Asia. It connects the Arab countries, or splits them, which is something very strategic geopolitically. It's also a route from Asia to Europe. It's a very diverse country with a very strategic geopolitical location. You have the argument of that it's important to be there and to serve the interests, supposedly, of the United States. There's a counter argument that says supporting Israel in its form at the moment as a supremacist ethnocracy, as a genocidal state, is harmful for US foreign policy. Many people in the US believe that, genuinely. Whether people in politics or analysts or people with their opinion about the US foreign policy. They see it as harming and damaging to US foreign policy. Like, what? Hold on a second. You call yourself a big democracy, you talk about human rights, yet you're supporting a supremacist state that's based on racial segregation and religious supremacy. How can that possibly support the United States foreign relations and image across the world? My view, my simple view, is that all of the maps of the Middle East, including maps across the world, they were drawn by previous empires, like the Middle East, North Africa, Sykes-Picot Agreement between the French and the British before they left, and they made all of these divisions to keep the countries divided. And at many points, they did divisions that were not very relevant and did not consider the cultural, religious, and ethnic and historical backgrounds of areas and certain tribes and people to continue the conflict, right? Similarly to what they did with Kashmir between Pakistan and India. They split Palestine, right? And they granted, supposedly, right? They granted something they don't own to people who don't deserve it at the expense of the indigenous people who actually own the land, who have been there for centuries. So they've made it's a typical neo-colonial trick, divide and rule, really, and make destabilize countries to ensure their reliance on you. What empires want or do not want is independent, strong states. Like my argument that I have with regards to Palestine, for example, is why wouldn't a one full democratic equal state not support US interests or European interests? Not saying that it'll be a follower or a slave to them. No, an independent state that's powerful, that is democratic, that has equality for everyone, and open to do business with all of the world. Why would that be a problem? Right? Because it would create some sort of stability in the Middle East. Many Arab countries will be fine because no problem, we're going to deal with a country that's equal for everyone. We finally have a solution for the Palestinian people. Why not? It doesn't make sense. So there must be something behind that. There's something beyond the idea of democracy and equality. And that idea is to keep this country divided, to keep Israel as a neo-colonial front, to keep the countries in the Middle East divided and constantly facing wars. Now, the problem with this war particularly is that it reached a stage where it doesn't suit the foreign policy of the United States of America. The Pentagon has a policy of low heat, ongoing fires. Okay, so they want conflicts, they like conflicts, but they don't like them spiraling out of control. When they start spiraling out of control, oh no, the image is not good. We're gonna probably face a backlash. Someone might add pressure on us. Look what happened now. Their bases are attacked, destabilizing the situation. Not great for their economy, not great for their image across the world, and all of these things. So that's why they're very angry with Israel, because they want Israel as it exists, as a supremacist ethnocracy that oppresses the Palestinian people. They want Israel to remain as it is, but they don't want it to reach a level where it actually shows its true image and true core to the world, which is what Israel is doing at the moment. And Israel, by doing that, is doing everyone a favor. It's doing the whole world a favor. Obviously, on the other side, you have a genocide, which is awful. A favor, what I mean is the image, because we know that that's Israel. We've known that this is how they are ever since they were established. But it wasn't clear to the world. The world viewed Israel as, Israel state, yeah, they have a couple of conflicts with the Palestinians, but they don't know what happens on the day-to-day life of either the Palestinians in Israel or the Palestinians in the West Bank or the Palestinians in Gaza, right? Because the mainstream media is with them, is aligned with them. So I hope that elaborates on your question as to what's the real reason that the USA supports Israel. And by the way, more and more people, especially Americans, are seeing that it doesn't really make sense to support Israel. That's why you have a growing population in the United States that's supporting the Palestinian cause and even supporting the Palestinian resistance. And some people did a 180 when it comes to their support for Israel. DL Sendero, the earlier video was right on. Mahmoud, the IDF has gotten themselves in a bad fix in North Gaza and now Khan Yunis surroundings. Seems it's going to be hard to detach from that fighting to attack Rafah. Thank you, firstly. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've been selling us the lie that they've dismantled 20 brigades of Hamas. They destroyed the tunnel network or most of it, right? And that it's only Rafah left, which is a complete lie. I mean, not only is the Palestinian resistance still active, it's increasing its attacks on Israel all across of Gaza. It's increasing its capability. It's introducing new weapons. It's introducing new techniques. And that's from the most northern part of Gaza down south. Every single part of Gaza is resisting the Israeli occupation. And they also sent them a message a couple of days ago with their missiles to Ashdod and the areas surrounding Gaza, right? That we still have missile capabilities. Not that we're doing defense attacks now, defending our area, that we don't have missiles to reach you. No, we do, and that's also sending a message to who? To the Israeli population that's looking to go back to the areas surrounding Gaza, that you're not safe, which is a big problem because the government's trying to convince them to go back and they're spending money on them. They're sitting in hotels, right? Three-course meals, right? And they'll complain about the conditions of the hotel, right? But yeah, they're selling us a massive lie, really, and they're getting hit in every single part of Gaza. Uh, Bondouye, what's going on in Jordan? Any chance they can block Israel's supply line? Yes, increasing protests in Jordan that we just spoke about earlier on. They can block the supply line, yes, but they will only block it if the pressure, if the public pressure gets bigger, which is what's happening. Because if you leave the government to it and there's no repercussions, not many people are talking about it, to them they'll be like, okay, we'll continue this land route for Israel. But clearly the public is not happy with it. They're seeing this land route that Jordan is providing to Israel, whilst Israel is preventing children from eating and starving them to death. You have famine in Gaza, children, women, and men dying because they don't have food. Why? Because Israel doesn't allow them to have food in Gaza. So people are increasingly speaking up against what's happening. And if they continue the pressure, then the government will have to play ball with them. John Doe, thank you so much for your super. Really appreciate it. What event can make Palestinian resistance win war in Israel, lose it once and for all? Assassination of Netanyahu, US ending support, Iran vertifying Tel Aviv with supersonics, military coup in Israel, civil war. What chess move or miracle event? Very interesting question. And I think with your input, you provided a combination of things that if they were to happen together or parts of them combined, you can see that happening. But what many people need to realize is these changes don't happen overnight. You're talking about the destiny of a country that's been established, albeit falsely and as an occupation, for 75 years, that's supported by the world's biggest superpower in terms of force, a power that's been used to getting its way and committing all of its crimes without any repercussions. Obviously, not everything's going to change in one go. Changes in countries, they can take decades, right? Revolutions, freedom from enslavement, from foreign occupation, they can take a very, very long time. But I think Israel, by committing this genocide, did the first step. They took the first step. Obviously, there's a lot in the process. There's a Palestinian resistance, the constant attack, them having a force themselves, all of these things, but at a global scale, right? Because public opinion matters very much, and that's why mainstream media won't show you what's happening in Gaza, and that's why we try and show you to the best of our ability what's actually happening in Gaza. When the public opinion starts to shift, usually actions start to follow. That's why with big global events, they need to manipulate the public opinion. That's why they control mainstream media to manipulate you and sell you the lie. And also, which is more dangerous, legitimize the killing of people in your head, either by demonizing them, labeling them, showing them as subhuman, and all of these things. That's very, very dangerous. This is slowly changing. People are now thinking, hold on a second. The people who you're telling me human animals, they're the wrong side. What are you talking about? Defending yourself, killing 32,000 people. Oh, you lied about the 7th of October. It wasn't the Palestinian resistance committing the mass killings, it was you. Why? Because Israelis said so. And we had footage of you committing massacres in the Nova Festival and Kibbutz Be'eri with your tanks, and you released them. That's why you have massive lawsuits coming in Israel against the Israeli authorities, the military leadership, and the political leadership when it comes to the 7th of October, because Israel lied. And they're pushing and pressing on mainstream media to continue and sell the lie. But people are not buying, or at least people with a level head. People without a level head, people who aren't all with it, they'll be manipulated by anything. But hey, we're talking about rational people who read, who view, who research, who question, and who don't fall for the manipulation. So I think it's a combination of these things, and I think that the process is not going to be ultra quick. However, it's important to highlight that despite the fact that the process will not be very quick, this gives people like us more responsibility, you and I, to continue the movement, to continue calling for justice and for equality and for peace, and to continue highlighting the suffering of the Palestinian people so that people won't become apathetic to what's going on, and so that people won't think that even if we do have a slight ceasefire, if less people start dying, that we can take a step back. No, we shouldn't take a step back. There's going to be a long thing. Things can drastically change sometimes in a short period of time, but don't expect things flipping 180 all of a sudden. However, it started, really. It started on the 7th of October, and I don't think it's going to end until we receive ultimate justice for the Palestinian people, because no matter what you want to try and do, and Israel, believe you me, they did try, the Palestinian people will not give up their rights. It doesn't matter where they are and what things they own and don't own, what capabilities they have or don't have. They're people who just simply won't give up, and Israel's image is becoming more and more clear to the world, who's constantly waking up in masses. And thanks again for the question and for your super thanks. That's from John Doe. Okay, let's try and go to the next question. I'm going to try not to miss anything. And again, thank you for everyone who's joining us as and when. Feel free to contribute and ask any questions too. Okay, we'll start with Vivette again. Vivette Shantia. Greetings, Mahmoud. If this force goes into Gaza, how will the resistance get rid of them or maybe even prevent them from settling there in the first place? Well, number one, no force will get in unless it's approved by the Palestinian resistance, because if not, then they're putting themselves at risk of being targeted, similar to how Israel is targeted. So let's say the Palestinian resistance is willing to cooperate with an international force, they will be the ones putting the conditions to that force, not Israel. Israel will sell it as, oh yeah, we sold it, we pushed them to do it because we wanted to deliver the aid, but the Palestinian resistance will tell them, you're not allowed to do this, not allowed to do that. This is what we're limiting everything to. Don't forget the Palestinian resistance dictated the rules of the temporary ceasefire. And Israel didn't want to put itself in a humiliated position yet again. But if a foreign force goes in without the approval, without understanding from the Palestinian resistance, what do you think? Anyone would want to go to Gaza? Seriously. Look what's happening to Israel. Imagine someone, any soldier from any other country saying, oh, hold on a second. This is what's happening to that country and they don't even want to fight and you're going to send me there. So it needs to be coordinated very well. And the one thing that I would tell you is the Palestinian resistance is very much awake to the efforts and is aware of Israel's levels of maliciousness and attempts to topple them down. And I don't think they will be falling for any of these attempts. Salam, Stussy, what's about Lebanon? Lebanon is escalating in Lebanon. We've seen back and forth attacks. Israel also attacked Syria heavily, reportedly killed about 43 people, including a commander in Hezbollah. And it's not looking like they're backing down. I spoke about a recent report in Israel that says that the Israeli Air Force is having a drill, a massive drill to prepare for something very big. So that's something that's very big is one of the two options. Number one, Lebanon. Number two, Rafah. Rafah, why do you need the drill though? Because you're already in Gaza. You have your targets. Most likely, it's targeted towards Lebanon. However, you know, if as much as they want to talk, really, are they in a position to go and attack Lebanon on a full scale? I highly doubt so. I don't think so, personally. They obviously have their division, their most advanced division up in Lebanon 36 that consists of the majority of the Golani Brigade, which is the most ancient, really, the oldest brigade in Israel. It's named Golani after Al-Jolan, Golan, because of its experience in the area as well. They were in Lebanon in 82. They participated in 2000, 2006 as well. That's why they're there. But even if Israel was to go on an all-out war in Lebanon, they will be in a much worse situation than they're in Gaza at the moment, especially with the increasing discontent and criticism globally from countries that were just before the 7th of October, some of the closest allies to Israel. There is a shift. There is a shift, ladies and gentlemen. And it's good. It's not enough, but it's good. And Israel's image is not getting any better. Omar Zaqut, did you see the Mufti of Libya, Sadiq Al-Gharyani, made a speech, fatwa, saying any soldiers in Jordan or Misr defending the border, preventing populations from flooding the border, forbidding it? Yes, I heard about it. And I mean, I have mixed opinions when it comes to this, to be honest with you. Why? Because number one, we know that the moral position should be to open the border. We know that that's the moral and that is the right position. To come and say that it's forbidden to do that from a religious perspective, that could well be a valid opinion and it could be right, okay? However, when you are quoting it, okay, when you're putting the religious robe on an opinion, what you might be saying, whether you mean it or not, is that if you don't follow this opinion, then you're X, right? And that can be a problem. I would prefer personally to criticize the act as it is. From a religious perspective, let's say from an Islamic perspective, it's clear. It's clear as daylight, right? You call for justice, you support the needy, you stand up for what's right, even if people next to you don't like it. All of these things are obvious. However, what you don't want is to create a religious conflict between people. This is my concern with something like this. Although again, the point itself might be valid, but I would be wary when it comes to, you know, putting a label on it, a religious label, right? Similarly to when you call yourself, for example, a religious state. You know, I have my religion, I have my beliefs. I consider myself, for example, a Muslim, right? A religious Muslim. However, when it comes to a state as an entity, you know, when you talk about a state, states don't pray really, right? I find it a little bit absurd for a state to have a religion, personally, right? The state can have people who follow a certain religion by majority. You can have Christian majority countries, Muslim majority countries, atheist or whatever it is. My problem when states start to get a religious labeling is it can potentially lead, and as it has led many times in history, to autocracy, to dictatorship, similarly to how democracy really is going there. The problem is when it comes to religion is the levels of manipulation can become far greater. So when it comes to the involvement of the state and religion, and I know it's a very deep and long subject that we can talk about for hours, but I personally would rather have, let's say, the elements or morals of religion, the religion or other religions or ideologies too, being implemented, like from an Islamic perspective, justice. وإذا حكمتم بين الناس أن تحكموا بالعدل. And if you have ruled between people, be just, right? And we have something also called qist in Arabic, which is ensuring the implementation of justice. So the enforcement of justice. However, when you know, no one wants a replica of, you know, what you have in Saudi Arabia, or even some elements to what you have in other countries, like Iran. Iran, to an extent, for example, with the religious view and imposing a religious view on the population. I don't like that, right? So I think when it comes to these things, I would rather focus on the act itself. Try not to label it and be careful as to what it can potentially lead to, regardless of how right or wrong it is. And I know some of you might disagree with me, but hey, that's fine. Okay, let's try and go to the next question. It's me. What is stopping the Muslim countries to help the Palestinians, countries in the Middle East, including Egypt? The fact that they are the produce of previous empires. They're the produce of Sykes-Picot, that when they were established as a nation state, most of the Arab states, it was with the blessings of the British Empire and the French, and they had their limits. You know, when someone else draws your borders, tells you, oh, hey, that's your country, but listen, you need to play ball with me. That's how it is with the Arab countries. The problem is with Arab and Muslim countries that most of them are dictatorships. It's not like you hardly have any democracy in or freedom in many of the Arab and Muslim states. And that's a massive contribution to giving Israel an open check to commit this genocide. Because if these countries represented the will of the people, yeah, and the same applies to Western countries, Western democracies, or what they call themselves democracies. If they applied the will of the people, if they actually followed the will of the people, then you wouldn't see what's happening in Palestine to the level that it is at the moment, really, because any decent human being will be against this. And if the countries do actually represent their populations, then their governments must follow suit and enforce action as the people demand and want. But Israel and the Zionist movement, they thrive in the darkness. That's why they want to ban TikTok. That's why they try and shadow ban my channel, for example. That's why they put pressure on many people who speak up and have big following, right, on social media platforms. They don't want that. That's why they take off people with an ounce of brain and decency from mainstream media. That's why you have mass resignations in certain networks. Okay, let's try and go to your next question. Douglas Boone. How many people have left Israel, flew away? In my estimates, over 3.5 million, including the 1.2 million who were already out of Israel before the 6th of October, excluding their descendants. Up to mid November, that's long back, right? Just 1 month into the war, you've had 900,000 to 1 million by Israeli statistics really leaving because of the war. So they either were on holiday and didn't come back because of the war, or they were in and they left due to the attack. And Israel stopped releasing statistics ever since. Why? Because the numbers are increasing. You have days in Israel where you'll have 30,000 people leaving only through Ben Gurion Airport, for example. So you've had 2.2 million since only back in mid-November. We'd be conservative by saying 3 to 3.5 million out now. And by the way, the Zionist Federation, the World Zionist Federation, they made a research, right? They did a poll with Israelis who are outside of Israel, and they asked them how many of you are willing to go back to Israel, and 80% said no. So demographically speaking, you approximately have a 70% majority Palestinian country between the Jordan River to the sea, yet it's being ruled by this small, teeny, mini, miny, genocidal, supremacist, satanic death cult. Okay, let's see if you have any more questions. So many of you are asking me about these red heifers, the cows, right? If they say, Val Bowen said, if they say they need these red heifers to be pure, how can they be pure if they are genetically modified? Look, all of this is a bunch of nonsense, really. I mean, the whole ideology of Zionism and the way they're coating it with Judaism is a bunch of nonsense. You have a violent supremacist ideology, and they're coating it with whatever they like or whatever suits them from Judaism to supposedly implement these, whatever you want to call them, really, what they believe in, right? Not to kind of be disrespectful for anyone, because, no disrespect intended. But, they've been talking about them from a very long time ago, by the way. They're just popping up now, but they have them prepared from 10 years ago, even more. There was a report in Israel that there was this guy he was a journalist working in one of the big networks in Israel, and he went to a farm and they were preparing it. They were like, we have the cow, but whenever the political time is right, then we'll have the cow. It's as if, they have it ready, but when the time is suitable, they'll bring us a red cow. And yeah. But in terms of Al-Aqsa, by the way, they actually have plans to destroy it and rebuild this supposed temple that never existed there, really, and that they tried hard to find evidence to relate the compound to anything connected with Solomon's temple since 1968, and they haven't been able to. Fight back. Who is asking for an international force on the ground? Israel. Instead of the world talking about an international force in Israel, enforcing law and order on a genocidal state and taking over the government and implementing a decent government, right? They're talking about Gaza. Absurd, really. And I mean, I've been speaking about this from a very long time, ever since I heard the word or the term the day after Gaza. Dude, don't talk to me about the day after Gaza. Talk to me about the day after Israel, about the day after Zionism, about the day after darkness and supremacy and racism and hate and genocide. Not the day after a refugee camp that Israel caused. It's insane. And some people fall for it. You need to know they speak about these things to kind of prepare it in the minds of the people that, it's a temporary thing, Gaza. It's not a legit thing, right? This Hamas thing, right? Although their aim is the Palestinian people and getting rid of them. Typical neo-colonial, arrogant mentality. Ram plans. Hello, Mahmoud. Only heard about Hamas freeing their hostages, but absolutely nothing about hostages held by Israel. Are the latter included in the ICJ resolution? The ICJ resolution that spoke about the genocide primarily spoke about the genocide and stopping the acts of genocide rather than the hostages or the prisoners. The latest order is aid, and from what I heard and saw, it wasn't conditional with the prisoners or hostages. However, the ones who are talking about a ceasefire plus Israeli hostages are usually the Israel's allies, primarily the United States of America, ignoring the fact that thousands of Palestinians have been kidnapped, really, not detained, right? Kidnapped by Israel in the middle of the night sometimes. Some of them are children under what's called administrative detention. You're being kidnapped out of nowhere without your family knowing your whereabouts, without having access to legal aid, and they can do that for 6 months and then they can renew it again without anyone knowing. And again, what does this show? This shows that these people who are speaking about Israeli prisoners and not the Palestinian prisoners are supremacists, are racist. Why? Why? Because you're telling me about the Israelis. Talk to me about the Palestinians who have been there for tens of years, about the Palestinian children being kidnapped, the children being deliberately killed for fun in the West Bank. Talk to me about them. Plus, it's really funny. And another something that's really absurd here. They talk about the Israeli prisoners in Gaza and they demand Hamas to release them. Hamas told you, I'm willing to release them. Just stop the genocide. So why don't you put pressure on Israel to stop the genocide? Secondly, you're worried about the Israeli prisoners in Gaza. Israel killed over 80. How many did Hamas kill? None. The Palestinian resistance, how many Israeli prisoners did the Palestinians kill? None. How many did Israel kill? Over 80. Some of them deliberately, knowingly. To them, it's a burden for Israel. Why? Because they have to pay a price. The Palestinian resistance countered it by saying, even if we have won, we'll ask for everything. The price will increase in return. So it's absurd, really. But they're still saying that. Irma Galvan, thank you so much. You asked me, Mahmoud, since several ports and airports have been hit, are they still functioning properly? Yes, because the damage that happens to them is very limited. I mean, and especially when it comes to Ben Gurion. So let's say if a missile goes down on, you know, on the asphalt or in any area that's not very strategic, not like a control and command unit or control center, right? They can fix it relatively easy. So the resistance, although they target them strategically, and that obviously is a problem for Israel, they don't tend to cause a lot of damage because we haven't seen strategic weapons hitting very sensitive areas in Israel yet. So the strategic weapons I'm talking about, large, very large missiles that are usually held by Hezbollah primarily. But Israel's preparing for such a scenario. So they're still functioning, but, you know, they're careful. Kate, question. What will be the next step by the ICJ when Israel refused to comply? What will the UN, Russia, China, etc. do? Send military sanctions, just give lip service? You know, that's the only thing that they can do, the ICJ. Say, you know, condemn. Tell them you need to do that. At the end of the day, Israel understands the language of force. And this language of force, and I had this argument in one of my previous videos, it needs to be followed by some sort of action. And this action needs to be done by a power that's apart from the US, really, not just the US. Although what's happening between the United States and Israel, don't take it lightly. There is a difference, obviously, but they're still aligned. However, it's not the US we should be waiting for. The people, the countries who will make a difference will be Russia and China by certain moves. They haven't done them yet, but again, if that's the thing here, what people need to understand. If you have the world's most important international court giving an order, and you have a state not complying, and they can get away with it, what's the conclusion? Jungle law, wild, wild west, right? Now we know that. Why? Because the US could get away with murder. What, they killed 1 million Iraqis. Let's not forget that. To them, the Gaza genocide is peanuts. People need to remember that. Previous colonial countries that massacred and killed and enslaved tens of millions of people. To them, what Israel is doing is just nothing. Killing 30, 32,000, 40,000 people. We killed millions. They'll tell you. People need to remember that. You're talking about a mentality of people who have already have this dehumanization embedded in their ideology and their belief. This supremacist neo-colonial superior mentality. It already exists. How many people did the British Empire kill? How many people did the French kill? Right? And I'm talking about the governments, right? When they went to invade other countries in Africa, other countries too. How many did they kill? So to them, Israel's just, oh, poor thing. However, the difference is now you're talking about, hold on a second, it's happening live. Back then you could manipulate. Hell, today you can manipulate, but it's a little bit more difficult to manipulate today, We give them a bit of a headache. So it's more difficult to legitimize it nowadays. Geopol, do you think a proposed international force in Gaza might be armed or a cover to get American troops on the ground? Absolutely. Look, this whole floating Pierre is ambiguous, very suspicious, especially the fact that it's done by the US and it's supported by Israel. Oh, the two countries committing and supporting the genocide. They are worried. Well, you have land routes, you have thousands of trucks, and you have a culprit. You have an address to the culprit, to the mass murderer, the criminal. Go and stop him. Ask him to open the land routes from Rafah and get the thousands of trucks of aid inside to feed children who are dying because of starvation. It's very ambiguous, very suspicious, but I think the Palestinian resistance is awake and they actually sent a message by their frogmen attack on Israel in Zikim, just over a week ago that I spoke about, that we still have eyes even in the sea and we can target you. So don't think that they are not aware of what's happening. Val Bowen, is Russia really in Syria? Yes, absolutely, 100%. Russia has a port in Syria, Tartus, owned by Russia, and they have troops on the ground. They have Air Force deployment in the Golan Heights, and they have a very, very strong presence in Syria. If it wasn't for Russian presence in Syria, I think it would have been easier to take down the Syrian government. Tom McTeague, sorry if I mispronounced that. So who provides the red heifer, the Jews or the evangelical Christians? Good question. I think the evangelical Christians will fund it or will fund the farm, and probably some people in Israel will provide it, the farm. But no, seriously, it's been ready. It's been there, the cow, for cows, not one cow. Genetically modified cows. Okay. Let's see if you have any more questions. Okay, we'll finish it up with this one. Salam Stusi again about Russia. What's about Russia? They don't talk much and help for the Palestinians. Look, they do verbally say and speak. They are the ones who initially proposed, some of the first countries who proposed an immediate, unconditional ceasefire that could have prevented this genocide from happening. They have delegations of the Palestinian resistance. They tried to make the Palestinian political leadership closer, you know, make better ties and bonds with the Palestinian political groups. But again, you know, when it comes to intervention, direct intervention, whether it's military intervention primarily, which is what most people speak about when they talk about other countries joining, you need to understand that these countries, most of them will not get involved unless their national sovereignty and national borders are attacked. Why? Because once they do step in, they have legal, diplomatic, judicial, and military implications. That's why Iran, for example, they support, however, they don't support directly as Iran. They support through the allies of Iran, right? So it's important to highlight these things. The same applies to Egypt and to Turkey as well. If you want my opinion, I personally have a problem with the following. I don't have a big problem with someone who says something that I'm not totally happy with. I have a problem with someone who says they will do something, but they don't do it. I have a bigger problem with that. Why? Because let's say if you're a country and we expect something from you, but you don't say you're going to do it. Yeah, I'm not happy about that, but at least you didn't say you're going to do it. The bigger problem is someone saying, oh, I will, or we will, and this and that, and then they don't do it. And I'm not going to start naming right now. Do you know what I mean? But I mean, Russia, they never said they will interfere, for example. But if an all-out war breaks out, really, if the US starts turning the table, and don't be surprised if they do, because if Israel's genocidal, then the US is 1,000 times more genocidal than Israel. And you can expect the unexpected from them. And you have the same powers controlling them from the back. So if they do, obviously Russia will have to intervene, and they will have China aligned with them. Remember that. China and Russia will be like one. They know their enemy very well, and the US is prepared for that. Well, they say they're prepared for that, but they know that it can come. And anyone, if you have people who are rational enough or reasonable enough in the US, they know they're not going to be able to take two superpowers at once if everything breaks, if an all-out war breaks out. I have another question. Faith in Allah, unite for peace. That's the name. Do you think other nations like China are waiting for a certain number of civilian casualties before intervening? I think the same applies to China. Exactly what I said about Russia applies to China. You know, they had their diplomatic support, their coordination and efforts with Russia to stop the genocide were undeniable. Their criticism for Israel. But again, direct intervention, it would be when they would feel like they are under threat, or that the US coalition, the US coalition's attack on them is imminent. It's gonna happen, and that they're actually preparing to attack them very soon, and they would potentially have counter-strike. But you need to understand, these countries that are bigger, they look at things from a bigger perspective. Like, to them, it's more serious if they attack Iran rather than Gaza. They don't like it with Gaza because they know what Israel is. It's a US front, right? They know it's a neo-colonial entity. It's small though, it's been there for a while. But when it comes to a country like Iran, for example, that's your backyard. That's an exporter, a supporter. Things might change then. Taylor Samhouri, Habibi, what do you think will happen if they torn down Al-Aqsa Mosque? Would all Muslims in the world go and fight the Israelis at the third most holy site in Islam? Hell, I'd go, lol. Well, look, let's not forget that they burnt Al-Aqsa in 1967 or 68. At the time that they claimed that it was an insane person who lit it up. There wasn't a very big, you know, rage against it. There were a couple of protests here and there. It's different now. Obviously, you have social media, but I think I think the killing, I think the genocide, the mass murder of 32,000 people is worse than burning Al-Aqsa, if you ask me. So if people weren't in a state of outrage, really, or if they didn't take enough action to stop the killing of people, I don't expect them to go all berserk if Al-Aqsa Mosque is taken down. I might be wrong, but even from a religious perspective, human life, human blood is more holy than stones. Not to undermine the holy places, of course not. But I think what's happening is enough to take every action you can possibly take, obviously within the legal boundaries of wherever you're living, so no one can try and have a take on me with this, to stop it, obviously. Because the killing of people is worse than destroying buildings, no matter how holy they are. Marvin Vergus wants me to impersonate Bibi Netanyahu. And I know this is not, I wasn't supposed to do this, but I'm going to tell you guys again, you are on the wrong side of history. You should be supporting Israel and you should be supporting our government because we're the light and they're the darkness. So thank you very much. And I think we'll end it at there. God bless Israel. And we will be defeating the Hamas. That's for Marvin, for you. The impersonation of Bibi. And we'll end it at there, right, with a bit of a light-hearted impersonation. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad I made you laugh. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'll hopefully, obviously, enjoy your weekend, day, night, or afternoon. I will hopefully update you with the next live stream as well. Today, excuse me, I kind of updated you about an hour before, but that's how I operate lately, as in when I have the time, I will immediately post it. I'll try and give you a bit more notice next time. But thank you so much for joining me, all of your comments. I'm sorry if I missed some of your comments, but I'll see you soon in the next video. Take care.